we start making out, and slowly but surely my hand goes down between her legs. And
Oh,
all of a
that's
sudden I feel,
Foley. All right, all right, all right. That's enough. All right. We all know the drill. I believe everybody has been familiar with this panel as before. So, welcome back, my friends. I hope you enjoy the ride. Buckle up, shut the fuck up, and listen. Pay attention along with what's going on. Stay on topic and fucking don't interrupt because you've all just seen what an example you can be made of. All right, let's go around the room. I know Spicoli, you're fast, so why don't you kick off with a question, please? And please don't talk about the JJ and stupid shit. And don't talk, I don't need to hear that Mel is a guy and all that stuff. We already have heard this statement before, so please just get right to the point and the question because I have very little patience at this point. And please send fucking wine. Spicoli.
well, don't go off on me just because Mel was rude. I'm not going to be rude. I'm going to be very succinct here. Gender and sex are the exact same thing. They have been for hundreds of years. It's only recently that narcissistic, autistic people have to feel special and think they invented something new when they didn't. Okay. Now, what is a man and what is a woman? Since gender and sex are the same, the reality is a man basically, this is it. A man has a penis, a woman has a vagina. It's that simple. Whether she can get pregnant or not, it's that black and white. Now, can I give an example why this is important real quickly, okay? And then I'll leave. Here's why it's important, okay? No interruptions. I go into a bar, I sit down, I have a drink. I see what I assume is a very attractive woman, and I go up there and ask her if I can buy her a drink. Please don't say anything.
Stop. You all know my rule. Go ahead, continue, Spicoli.
Can I just make my analogy without him interrupting or her?
Go ahead, please.
I'm buying the person a drink. I'm buying the woman a drink, okay? We decide, we're gonna go up to her room or my room and we're gonna have a further drink. We go up to the room, she's a beautiful woman. We start making out, and slowly but surely my hand goes down between her legs. And all of a sudden I feel.
All right. That's enough. Because I will say YouTube can hit you for going into detail kind of things like that, Spicoli. You fucking know better. All right. Where did Dustin Buck, I believe you were backstage earlier if you wanted to pop back up. All right. Let's kick off to Corinth, please.
Okay. I have one primary question for Rob here. If gender is what you're defining as, it's a grammatical referent to sex. How do we make sense of the term man up? Are you telling me make more sperm, make more little gametes? Are you telling me make more X, Y chromosomes? What biological part of sex are you referencing with that term?
Just because there are other terms that may use the same suffix doesn't mean that they're the same as the terms we use, such as man and woman. So you could say manly, which would be another thing, man up.
No, it's not the suffix, it's man up. I'm telling you to be more of a man.
Right. And so we would say there are traditional characteristics we associate with biological men. And so when I say man up, you're telling people to embrace those traditional characteristics.
And those characteristics are biological or social characteristics in cases like man up?
The characteristics would be characteristics that come from a biological nature that we normally associate with men. So strength. Do you acknowledge that men are stronger than women? That we consider that there's a biological reality to that quote construct?
On average, but I'm not sure how this is relevant to a case of man up. Are you telling me be stronger when you're telling me to man up? Yes. Physically stronger?
I'm saying suck it up, right? That's what I'm saying. You disagree
that's a different sense of strength.
Well, it's still a sense of strength. It's a sense of willpower, strength, constitution.
No, this is emotional.
All of those things that biologically we could say are traditional characteristics that have a biological characteristic to being closer to males.
Okay, so this is completely different. This is a social idea of strength here. This is more stoic.
That's not true. There is still biological reality to why people are more... Biologically, do you think males or females are more likely to be stoic?
I don't think it's biologically indexed. I think that one's entirely social.
So you don't think when someone says man up, explain to me, take the word stoic out of it. What do you think that term means?
I think they're saying start suppressing more emotions and fulfill a male social category.
Okay.
He's somewhat of a more like tempered person.
Okay.
These
So
are
do you think
entirely
that
social.
biological males tend to be more tempered and exhibit the characteristics that are more what we consider a male type characteristic? That's, I can't remember the exact.
Yeah, but I have no reason to believe that this is related to biology over social roles.
Though that's not
over how we
true.
stigmatize people.
It is that the social role that we associate with it has roots in biology. The same would be true of like
Can you
sort
show
of
me where?
Yes, right? Because we could reference, if we did studies on this, that we would see that these characteristics are more likely associated with males. So not just men or
I agree,
women.
it's associated, right?
Oh,
I
it's not
already
just
conceived that.
associated, it's a reality with them, right?
Yeah, I want you to show the causal link to it being the biological aspect of it.
The
I want to know
causal,
exactly
the
where
causal,
the biology is
the
in
causal
action there
link
to show
is
stoicism.
the causal link is that where do you think that the societal implications of what we consider masculine and feminine come from? Where did they originally come from?
I'm sorry, I don't know why you're answering my question with the question right now.
Because it gets
I
to
don't
the
know how
root.
this,
It gets to the root of the fallacy of your way of thinking. I'll answer the question for you since you seem
Okay,
to
what
be.
fallacy then?
I'll answer
What
the
fallacy
question.
am I making?
I'll answer the
I mean, you
question.
said I'm making a fallacy.
Yes,
Can
you
tell me
are
a fallacy at least?
Okay, all right, Corinth, settle down a little bit. Let's go through one at a time.
I mean, he said I'm doing a fallacy. I just want to know at least what fallacy I'm
Okay, I
committing.
don't have the specific. I will say you are making an erroneous assumption. Is that better for you?
Okay, where's my erroneous assumption when
Your
you made the
erroneous-
claim and I'm asking you to substantiate your claim?
Your erroneous assumption is that there's no biological reality into why we have social constructs of the ideas of things that are associated with masculinity and femininity. So the truth is that that these sorts of, we could call them stereotypes of what is male behavior, came about originally because that was most likely to be from male behavior. In addition, the entire conversation is irrelevant anyways, because the idea that we would use a term like man up to mean characteristics traditionally biologically associated with men, therefore we have constructs of what we assume manliness is still irrelevant to the question of whether or not gender would have some sort of connection and be an expression of sexual reality.
Okay, it's entirely irrelevant, and there are two things here. First, you just reasserted the position that I asked you to justify, so we have to go back into that. It's not an erroneous assumption when I'm unconvinced that this is a biologically enacted thing. That's you making the assumption that it is. I'm saying, hey, I don't have any evidence of this. Can you give me the case for this? And tertiarily, the third point you made, it is entirely related because this is the idea of social gender. This is a social idea of masculinity. If we're saying man up means this, we're having an entirely social idea of man here. If you can't give me why this is a biology thing, then you're poorly justifying why you think this distinction does actually exist.
I can give you. Can you give me any example of where the notions of masculinity would have came from if there's no connection to biology?
General social realities.
Okay, so
I
how
just,
did
again,
that
I don't understand. Again, I don't understand how you asking me a question is you substantiating your point.
define? So wait, is your argument that when the reason that asking you a question proves that if there's only one possible explanation for something, or it is the best possible explanation, then therefore that's the explanation we should go with? When you're incapable of providing an alternative explanation to my interpretation, that the reason that we have principles of what we understand masculinity to be is because it's connected to the biological reality of what males are, then that would mean that we should prefer our definition. Your inability to answer questions without glibness shows that you don't have a definition that would be more suited. Therefore, by default, I win the argument. Now, when you say it's because of general social constructed principles, can you define general social constructed principles and articulate how we got originally to these socially constructed principles? Were they completely
Again, I'm not
arbitrary?
saying, so first of all, I'm
What
not
the
saying that this is
fuck
the
are
answer
you
to the
talking
question I
about?
asked originally.
Yes,
Second
it
of all, you're the one who made the assertion, hey, we do have an explanation for why this thing comes to be. You made the claim, hey, it's because of this. I'm saying we don't have any good reason to believe this is the case over the alternative hypothesis.
Sure. we
Both
do.
of these are equally as plausible. If you can give why this is the case, you'd be able to substantiate this. But you saying, oh, Corinth isn't able to justify it, therefore I win, isn't actually how this works, because I'm not giving you this is the case. I'm giving you an alternative case to show that you don't have the pure only option here. You have to substantiate why, which is, again, I'm confused as to why you keep answering questions instead of backing up your claim.
You aren't even able to define the term of which you defined as social construct. You can't define why it would be that something became a social construct. Is it completely arbitrary? Is there a 50-50 chance given any society that what will determine masculinity could be X or the opposite of X?
Are you going to answer the question that
Yes,
you were
I'm
asked
answering.
like 5 minutes ago, or
Again,
continually try and pivot
Again,
off of it?
I don't know if you understand how argumentation works, so I'll slow it down for you real quick. If we have if we're asking ourselves a question, why does X exist? And I say X exists because of this. And you say, I don't think that you need to prove it. And I say, okay, the first thing we'll do is ask, is there an alternative explanation for why X exists? And I say, so can you give me an alternative explanation? And you say, no, you can't ask me questions. Then I'll say, fine. You are inherently saying that you're incapable of providing an alternative explanation, which means without any more proof, I could say if there's only one possible explanation, then we must accept that explanation is true. Now, when you do glibly give sort of an alternative explanation of, well, it's just a social construct, now we're comparing, okay, who would be more likely to be accurate in this scenario? You refuse staunchly to answer any reasons as to why that would be the case. I could get deeper into the biological reality if you would like, because of sort of the
I
biological.
would like that. That's what I've been asking you
Sure,
for this
and then
entire time.
you will give me the courtesy of answering my questions. Fair enough?
Sure.
Okay. So, because of the biological realities of males versus females, there's different reproductive strategies and different behaviors that become necessary because of those reproduction strategies, because of things like bone structure, strength, etc. So, our social construct of men being more likely to be defenders, hunters, etc., you may say those are social constructs, but they come from a biological reality. The idea of having temperance and being stoic comes from that tradition, that we needed men traditionally to be less.
Rob, how many edges does the circle have, buddy?
Who said that?
Hold on, Doc. Let
That's
him
Duck.
him and Corinth
it's
are having
Duck
a
said
good
that.
back and forth. I'd like to let them go, please. Thank
Okay.
you.
Doc, I know how you doing, my friend. So when we see that, right, that there's like sort of behaviors because of the biological realities, and men had to be the people that were trying to get more women to have sexual reproduction with, and their biological differences and strengths suited them more for being people that were more loners, hunters, things of that nature. Where women, because of the reproduction system that they had to be more nurturers and be more communal, etc. We could see then that biologically it makes sense that men would have to suck things up more, because by their very nature they're going to be more loners. So there is a biological reality to the term man up. Now, can you argue to me if there's no biological connection to the frame of social constructs? Is your argument that there's literally a 50-50 chance that masculinity could have meant sucking it up, or it could have meant the opposite of not sucking it up? Why did it end up meaning the thing that you're saying that it meant through a social construct if there's no connection to biological reality?
Okay, so there's two things here. I never said no connection to biological reality. I said it wasn't caused by biological reality. Things can be connected to things due to like tertiary reasoning. We wouldn't say, well, thing influenced part A influences part B, therefore part B is caused by the original thing. This is just a complete error of understanding what my position was. Now, if we're saying, oh, it can be as loosely as anything influenced at all by sex, sure, we can entirely grant this to be the case. But then this means that whenever we have any person on testosterone, they're going to be engaging in things of that sex. Unless we're saying, oh, this heuristical category is only acceptable when Rob is instantiating it or when Rob is referencing it, but not when people like Melanie or Corinth are referencing it. If we allowed these secondary sex characteristics to be identical to sex or things that are referenced to sex, we can have this coherent idea of gender being distinct from what biological binary sex of the two modes of reproduction are.
Can I jump in?
you're
'Cause-
equivocating
No,
at
you
this
can't,
point.
Doc.
Corinth is right, but you're missing
No, Doc,
something,
you
Rob.
can't jump in. I'm enjoying the conversation. You never really bring anything to the
About
table.
I
the
like
Yeah,
Rob. Just to be clear for
I-
everyone watching,
hold
I like
on.
Rob
I-
interpersonally.
You know what? We're just gonna speed date this.
He took Rob away. No.
There we are. What?
I thought I was going to speed
All
date
right,
Rob
all
for a
right.
minute.
So,
Or Doc.
where were we on this before Duck interrupted? No, I'm enjoying this conversation, Corinth, immensely. No, because you've already admitted now that there is a biological characterization to it. You say, well, it would also meet that characterization if we gave someone testosterone. You're right. If we chemically alter someone to be more biologically closer to the characteristics that men have, then we would say, yes, they're more likely to engage in the behaviors that socially we look at through men. That's absolutely true. That wouldn't make them men. You could pump up a woman to the gills with testosterone, she'll never be a man, and yet she would be more likely to have characteristics that are associated with being a man, because of the chemical makeup of what a man is that makes those characteristics likely to happen in the first place. You still haven't articulated. You just say, well, it could be tertiary, but you have no evidence to prove that it's tertiary or that tertiary nature of the biological reality isn't key to what occurred. It is clear that the best possible explanation offered between either of us that the social constructs exist because this had to do with biological realities of what men were, which then had the social constructs. Society was constructed about the biological realities of what people are. For example, even if we take out, quote, sex or gender characteristics, because of the biological reality of humans, we ended up thriving in communities where sort of communication is necessary, coming together is necessary. We need to have communities so we have access to food, water, etc. Those social constructs of like what a town would be or where people are more likely to live all came about because of the biological necessities of who humans are. The same is true of the characteristics we associate with masculinity, femininity, etc. While it is true that there could be exceptions to the rule, those characteristics, much like all stereotypes, started to exist in the first place for a reason because there was biological reality to it. When that's clearly the best reason, it's what we should prefer as the definition between sex and gender. This is going off on a red herring anyways, using a term specifically like man up to refer to a characteristic that we normally associate with men by definition. That's different than the concept of gender and the term of man-woman, because man up by definition means to act like a man, but that doesn't prove that man doesn't have a biological reality to it. In addition to that, you would still have to argue then if we don't accept that and it is social construct, how would you define the terms man or woman?
Okay, so I'm going to go work backwards from that. I'm going to use just because it's a little more fresh. So it's going to be relevant to this case. It's not a red herring because we're saying man up there. If man up is a biological term, if we're saying acting like a man is biologically indexed, then we're referencing you should be changing your behaviors in some biological way. If I tell you, hey, go man up, I'm not telling you to like change your reproductive pathway. At best, I'm telling you change some secondary sex characteristic, but generally I'm referencing some social idea. Now, if we're saying, well, the secondary sex characteristic is caused by the actual sex, then any case we're referencing the secondary sex characteristic must mean that would be affirming the consequent. This is a logical fallacy. When we're talking about this, we can have a second cause of these secondary sex characteristics, like HRT, where if we're saying, well, any behaviors outcome of these secondary sex characteristics would be indexed to sex, then we're referencing trans women as actually being women because we're referencing that sex there. Now, I don't think you think this is the case, which is why I think you have an actual distinction between these two concepts. Now, if we end up going back into the actualization, it's going to repeat into this idea of if we have women being, I'm just going to use man as like the alternative of how you defined a woman, adult human male. Is that okay with you? Thumbs up for yes, perfect. So if we have adult human male there with male being biological sex, if we mean reproductive pathway, primary, like the evolutionary biological definition, where small gamete form production, large gamete form production, that creates the binary. If that's how we're defining male there, then when we have these secondary sex characteristics being derived from, hey, testosterone allows us to function in this given way in society, a trans man who's on testosterone is going to be manning up and acting like a man in that sense. But now, we can have man mean something other than biological sex there, have it mean the social role, have it mean even things related to secondary sex characteristics, and that's still distinct from the original idea of man.
It's easy to defeat this argument because let's take the word man up out of it and use something that's synonymous. If I said act like a man, would you agree that that's sort of part of what man up means?
Yeah. I
Okay,
think like
and so therefore that doesn't disprove that we should interpret man as the biological reality of male, right? The very definition of the term says act like a man. That doesn't prove that man must mean something that's not biological reality.
When you say act like a man, what do you mean?
When I say act like a man, I mean that men are biological males, so you should act like a biological male and the characteristics we normally assume with them.
So
if I tell you
biological
real quick,
male,
if I
what
tell
are the
you,
categories of biological
like,
male?
if I tell you act like you need to have the eye of the tiger, act like a tiger, right? Am I saying that there's not a static definition of what tiger is? Actually, then tiger tiger's a social construct. Then it means being fierce and it means being attacking and defending your children. No,
yes, Rob.
No, it doesn't.
That's what we mean by act like a tiger.
Correct. Act like a tiger means that you should act like the characteristics we associate with tiger. But that doesn't mean the
Yes.
definition of the word tiger doesn't have an objective reality to what the scientific data is on what a tiger is. We don't
You
say
can have two
tiger is
definitions for
tiger.
these words.
We don't say tiger actually means things that think they're a tiger. We say we could objectively see that that's a tiger. And when we say act like that, we're talking about the characteristics that we see that we know from the objective reality of what tigers are. The same is true of saying act like a man. Man, just like tiger, has a biological reality. Saying act like it means what we associate with how that biological reality makes you act in the real world.
Yes, and that biological reality is not the only thing that can cause you to act like that. And that's the reason this is affirming the consequence. If you have someone
Morning,
who calls
man.
for these
Whoa,
things, you can be
whoa.
acting like a man. You can be more man-like without actually being any more male.
That's
you can
true.
Have this social idea.
That's true. You could be more tiger-like than some tigers with actually being
Yes.
a tiger. That doesn't mean that we say that the word tiger is just socially constructed and it doesn't have a stable meaning and it's
There could be
self-referential.
multiple
I'll
meanings,
ask you.
Rob.
I'll ask you one more time. Right? Can you define man and woman?
Yeah, I can give you multiple definitions for each if you want.
Give me the
There's no
definition that we should
multiple-
prefer.
You guys can't break shit down in layman's terms, can you? At all.
Yeah.
It's going to be like largely context dependent, right? Like if I'm an
Oh.
evolutionary biologist, if I'm defining man, I'm generally defining it in a biological sense. I'd probably do something like the sex that produces small gametes. But if I'm talking to you and I'm saying man up, I'm not talking about small gametes in that sense of man.
that's-
I'm talking about those behaviors. There are two reasonable definitions we can use here, and this is going to be a reason why man indexed to gender is going to be distinct from man
me
indexed
for
to
a
sex.
moment. Hobie, I know you're new here,
Yeah,
but
I'm
I have a very big annoyance with people who interrupt while
I'll
people
see
are
myself out.
talking. Thank you.
All right.
So I'll just finish with
I will see
this.
myself
Again,
out.
you conflate the term man up, which has nothing to do with the definition of man is, just like act like a tiger has nothing to do with the biological reality of what a tiger is, right? The definition that we should prefer of
I'm
man
not complaining. Just to be clear. I'm using a different use case of it.
well, you could say,
I'm
like,
being
you
clear.
could say, well, we could use the term man to mean a bunch of different things because I use the term man up, but man up isn't the term man. Man up by definition means to act like a man. And so therefore it's by definition talking about the characteristics of men. It's not speaking to the biological reality of what the term man means at all by definition. Right. And again, like
So-
the problem is for all terms of utility, like in the ways that we would use this most, it is clear that in any study that talks about outcome differences between men or women, it's always referring to the biological nature of it because we understand that it would be absurd to talk about self-referential when we're talking about income disparities between men and women or prison disparities between men and women. It would have almost no utility if what that was actually asking for is income disparities between people that identify as something, but there's no biological connection to it, versus income disparities that identify as the opposite, but there's no biological reality or connection to it. So in all senses, in utility, practicality, etc., it makes sense. And you still can't get away from the act like a tiger example where it just
Because
because
I'm
we're
agreeing with you. I'm
right,
agreeing
which
with you.
proves
No,
that
it doesn't prove what you're saying.
does.
It proves what I'm saying. We have a social idea of what a tiger is distinct from its biology that we're referencing there. We have a second use case of tiger, meaning some set of characteristics that you can enact.
That's
Being
untrue.
fierce,
When we
being
say-
aggressive.
when we
We're not
say
saying grow fucking stripes, Corin. You're not telling me go to the Bengali jungles and climb into a fucking tree
Untrue.
and catch a bird out of midair. You're
Untrue.
telling me
You're-
engage in these secondary characteristics.
The-
You're
again-
using this as some sort of
right.
general behavioral standpoint.
Right, just like saying man up just means act like a man. Saying act like a tiger, we could say it
Yes,
means
but we're not talking about the
please,
biological definition of man. Then.
please, we could say that you could insert the term tiger up. Yet still,
Yes.
anytime I say the word tiger, we understand that what I'm talking about is the biological reality of what a tiger is. When you use a term
No.
like tiger up or act like a tiger, you're talking about the characteristics that we normally associate with tigers. That doesn't change the fact that the only definition for the word tiger when it comes to the animal is the biological definition of what a tiger is. Now take the exact same argument with the term man and woman.
Notice how you have to index it
Well,
when it
here's
comes
what
to
I
the.
want to say to this.
confusing it
I
with
want to give Corinth, I apologize. I want to give you the final thought on that little exchange, Corinth, since that was his question. And then I do want to move over to Dustin because I believe he had something quick to say.
Okay.
Corinth, to
Um,
you. I apologize. I
this,
interrupted your
this
thought.
is just agreeing. There is this second use case. When we're talking about act like a tiger, we're not referencing the biological idea of tiger. You're not telling me to go grow the stripes. You're not telling me go run on 4 paws. You're telling me act in some behavioral characteristics way. Just like when you say act like a man, you're not telling me to act like an adult human male. You're not telling me to grow those chromosomes. You're not telling me to biologically age myself up. You're not telling me to like stop being a cat or something. You're telling me, hey, engage in this behavioral set that we identify as masculine in our given society. And that's what is referenced when we're saying man in a gender sense. If we're talking about like the other scientific idea of these studies wouldn't have utility, there can be easily these ideas of utility. If we find out that trans men fall into the exact category of where men are, a lot closer to where men are in terms of earnings and things like this, and trans women fall closer to where women do, this would actually tell us it's not as biologically related. It would be something a lot more social. These kinds of data points, if we are able to clarify between the two and see how these things line up, will actually be useful, not anti-utility.
It's.
Okay,
I'll just say real quick. Thank you for agreeing with me. You're right. Saying act like a man is a completely different concept than what a man is. Just like saying act like a tiger,
Yes.
it's a different, completely concept than what a tiger is. When we say
Yes, I agree.
tiger,
There are multiple
we
definitions
always
to the word.
no.
All right,
That
all
it's
right,
saying
let me-
act like we're saying act like a tiger, which is the characteristics associated that we see with tiger, right? The biological reality of what a tiger is and what we mean by saying the word tiger is always the same, right? If I say act like a football player, that does, or I say, act like, I don't even know, an adult. Nah, the adult's not a good example either. But you can see the point. You're inserting the word act like and saying because we say act like something, that refers to the social characteristics we associate with it. Therefore, there's multiple definitions to to what the term itself means. That's not true.
It is. It's just not the biology. And you caught yourself there. You even
That's
were
not true.
about to say it, but then you realized I'm not saying there are multiple biological definitions, even though there might be in different fields of biology. But in this given case, we have a societal idea of what a man is.
I say tiger. What comes into your head?
Oh, you're both
fear.
killing me. I wanted to because it has been
30 more
lengthy.
seconds, please.
30
What
more
comes into my mind
seconds.
is
I'm
the
counting.
survivor
I saw.
just
I
because we
say
talked about it
real quick.
before.
I saw a tiger.
Bengal tigers coming to my mind right
Wait a
now.
minute. There's no circumstances where you think that what I actually meant was I saw a person that was fierce and acting like a tiger.
There might be a case where that happens, right? It's going to be context dependent.
So we would still say, so you can see the exception doesn't
I don't
disprove the rule.
concede.
We know what a tiger is.
No,
just
it
like we
actually
know what a
does
man
because
is.
it's not a
It's not true.
categorical.
It's not true.
Disproves if it's
Then
a
no
categorical
words would
claim.
have
If it's
any
a heuristic
definition.
claim, our positions can be reconciled.
I'm good.
If you're
I
not
think
making
I've
a
proven my
categorical,
case.
there only is one definition of male, then it does disprove your claim because this is a second use case of male. If you're saying there can be multiple use cases of male, then we just agree in the first case. We agree, hey, man can be referential to gender, some social actualization of characteristics, rather than just being an adult human male.
Untrue.
And Corinth, you are being booted to the back. Sarcastic Saint says with a big 5. Corinth,
Fight,
stop
Melanie, fight.
whining and stop acting like the Furby. Go drink some almond milk and enjoy 5 minutes in the back. Oh, and
Melanie,
listen to
fight
the
for me,
song,
please.
Eye of the
So
Tiger.
I do have a question for Melanie and actually Rob here, right?
Well,
I
hold on,
watched the
Vibe. Hold
debate
on,
from the
Vibe.
beginning.
I appreciate
Sorry.
you.
I gotta
wanting
take a
to
piss,
switch
so
up
I'll
that.
be right back.
Go ahead and take a piss. Dustin, you had something to add to the closing statement. Was it towards Rob or Mel or your closing statement? Are you going towards Rob or Mel? Dustin. Dustin. Okay. All right. Well, then go ahead, Vibe.
Well, I'd love
Go
to
ahead.
go, but Rob just walked away, so
Oh, you were going
kind of
towards.
makes it pointless, doesn't it?
Okay. That's fair. I think Dustin
I
has
do.
full
I
one.
mean, I really enjoyed watching the debate between the two. I took notes and I had some things to say, so I'd love to continue when Rob gets back.
Okay. All right. Dustin, you're having crappy Wi-Fi. Don't keep trying to join. Just let it go.
And how's my audio,
Brandon,
by the way, is it better?
it still sounds echoey. I wonder if you maybe just need some sound proofing going on. Brandon, did you have something to add in?
And the man himself is back. That's
Oh, there
who
we go.
actually had an
Okay.
argument for him.
Okay.
And Melanie, are you online and just?
But I
mute,
mean, Vibe
you've
said
gone away.
first, so he can go first.
Yeah, go ahead, Vibe. Ask your question to Rob.
I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, I mean, so as I predicted on this debate, and Rob actually said in the original opening, this has been a dead horse that's been kicked so many times, killed, reborn, the whole gender debate, right? However, he did say that sex and gender are the same thing, so we don't need two different pieces on that. It's just sex for Rob. Mel did say that gender is a feeling, which I totally disagree with. And I really wanted to change both Rob and Melanie's claims on this, that I think there is another solution to this whole view that everybody has, right? So sex and gender are not the same. I do not believe that they intersect, but I do believe they are both binary. So you have sex, which is something that is, you're born. Doctors can look at your genitals and go, okay, you're male or you're female. Gender is also science based on statistics. Most men fit in this particular category. Most women fit in a particular category. It's like a bell curve, right? So on one side, on the male spectrum, you've got Jason Momoa on this one side, and then you got RuPaul on the other side. But they're still all men. They don't change on their spectrum. And then when you look at the colorful flag of the gender spectrum, we've got all these different people in different genders now. And ultimately, when you look at the definitions that they give, like a cisgender male is assigned by a doctor a gender, right? And doctors don't assign genders. They observe, they see it. And maybe they're wrong, but 99.95% of the time they're right. Basically looking, going, hey, this guy's got a penis, this girl's got a vagina. It's a crazy thing that any doctor assigns a sex, right? So based on like that's crazy. But we can put a pin on the assignment of genders, because somebody does assign genders, and that's society. Society. Oh, I heard somebody say, hey, somebody does assign genders. And who assigns genders? Well, you can, let's do a story. Sally and Johnny are married, and they're not racist. They're not homophobic. They're nothing. Like they're just perfectly good parents. But they have their first girl, and they buy her a Barbie. And the teachers go, oh, you played with the girls and you do hopscotch. And
Gotta land this a little faster though, buddy.
Say, hey, you're going to do ballet. So society is actually the people that actually assign the genders. Doctors do not assign genders. They observe and they correctly get it correct every time. Society is actually the whole culprit of this, the whole gender debate that we're having right now. The spectrum is ridiculous, right? You know, you have
I don't know, buddy. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, you're losing me.
Like I could ask questions. I think you're going to go all night. Let me ask you a question. If both RuPaul and Jason Momoa are men, define what a man is.
Well, a man is born male. So
then gender, sex. Next.
Yeah, thank you.
No. So
Reese from Philly, did you have some thought? No, hold on, Vibe, because you like just kind of went on forever, and I already have expressed my impatience this evening at this point. Reese from Philly, did you have something to add in?
Yeah, I chimed in late, like about 5 minutes before I hit the link, right? So I'm probably the least educated on the panel when it comes to this kind of thing. And I heard a couple terms that I've never heard before in my life, and I didn't understand what they meant. And I was rushing around looking for a pen to write them down, and by the time I found one, I forgot what they were. One of them was intersectional. I don't know what that means. I'm basically up here to try to get some understanding, because I don't really have any meaningful input. I'm confused about this whole thing. I don't understand how anyone alive could even consider more than two genders. I don't know how... I'm not religious, but I don't know how believers see that, because I know people that claim other genders and also claim to be believers, and then I hear stuff about how it's sinful and all this and that. And then I'm really old. I'm 55 years old, and I got in trouble in school. And
Reese,
at
I'm
work.
going to hold the educational format for a little bit later because we are trying to go through questions for Rob. So if
Can
you
I-
need more educational information about it, we'll wait until the panel starts to die down a little bit. Brandon, I believe
Can I say one thing real quick to Reese, if you don't mind?
Yeah, sure.
You said, Reese, you think you're the least educated person on the panel. Is that true?
As far as genders go, yes.
Okay, what that proves is that education doesn't equal intelligence because you're based,
No,
there's
not
two
at all.
genders, and sometimes you get so inundated with this sort of intellectual masturbation of being educated and indoctrinated that you start to believe all kinds of things that's obvious to anyone who's just a normal human being that it's not in reality. There's two genders. Sex is what biological sex does determine what those genders are. Men are adult males. Women are adult females. You nailed it, buddy. You don't need to be educated anymore on it.
I'd like to put a motion to second that on the floor.
Yeah.
Brandon, go ahead.
May I say one thing?
Yeah,
I dropped out of high school. I'm a painter. There's a lot of new words that are being invented that people don't understand, man. Like cis. What's cis? Come on. Like you're coming up with new words, new languages.
We can educate you guys later.
Cis is
the female that was born to my mother when I was not born. Can I put in a finishing statement and then go?
Yeah. Okay. I'll let Dustin do that.
Can I really quickly answer Hobie before he goes?
Oh, my dear Jesus. Dustin, please finish your statement.
I will. Okay. If I pull out a piece of paper, a white piece of paper from my pocket, and I call it $500, is anybody going to credit me with that?
Nope.
No. Yeah, right. But I'm demanding $500 worth of goods, aren't I? So the bigger picture here is you got a bunch of people that are trying to pass off white paper as $500. It's really just that simple.
Well, in a way, though, with that analogy, we do that. We have little pieces of paper. They're all about the same. It's what's printed on the front that makes you think it's like $100 bills versus 100 or
Glad
I could add that clarity. I'm out.
Can I take a $20 bill and pretend it's a $100 bill?
No.
All right, can I ask Rob my question?
Sure.
Okay, I just want to be sure. Do you think, Rob, gender and sex are identical?
I think that gender is the grammatical categorization of sex.
So is that a yes?
Well, it depends. I would say that for all intents and purposes, yes. But I guess you could say that because one has to do with grammar and the other doesn't, that there is a difference in the utility of the terms in that sense, the grammatical sense.
Sure, the utility question is a different question.
Disagree with that.
So I do.
Agree. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I do have an argument for you if you do think they're identical. So if gender isn't different than sex, then it is logically impossible for gender to be different than sex. But it's not logically impossible for gender to be different than sex. Therefore, gender is different than sex. Is there a premise there you disagree with?
Yeah,
I can put in.
I guess you have to slow down because it seems circular and not to make sense to me.
Yeah, sure. I'll put in
my opinion.
I'll put it in chat here.
Dude, that's using modal terms that makes it not apply.
Doing? Please stop fucking interrupting.
I pause when he talks.
So I put it in.
They were having an exchange between two people. Please mind that.
I apologize.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, so I did put it in the private chat there if you want to take a look at it.
Sure, let me take a look. Sure.
Yeah, if you do think they're identical, right? Because I think a lot of this debate is a semantic dispute, but I think you're going to put a big burden on yourself if you're going to make a claim like that.
Okay, so let me read this. You tell me. If gender isn't different than sex, so they're the same thing, then it's logically impossible for gender to be different than sex. So if they're not different, then they can't be different, okay? It's not logically impossible for gender to be different than sex. Okay, explain that premise.
Yeah, so there isn't a contradiction that's entailed from gender being different than sex.
But that's just the way. Of course there is.
Okay, so what's the contradiction?
The contradiction is all of the reasons that I argue the descriptive of is, that gender's just a grammatical way to discuss sex, and the reason that it ought to be. Both of those things prove the point.
We're not talking
Talking
about ought.
But your
we're
argument,
not talking.
well, I
Wait,
talked
we're
about
not
that real quick, real argument.
Real quick, because we're not talking about ought, right? And if you do think it's logically impossible, I just want the proposition and its negation that's entailed from the proposition that gender isn't different than sex. Can you derive that contradiction?
Yes, sex is sex is the descriptor of. Gender is the grammatical descriptor of sex. Therefore, there can't be a disconnect for the two. The two are the same. Your critique could literally be offered of any term about anything ever. In fact, it could be offered about the very nature of reality, because I could say it is not a logical impossibility that all of us right now are just brains in a vat and this is all simulation. And actually the term sex doesn't even exist. A simulation programmed that term into our brain today. Isn't that logically possible that that could be the case? Would you agree with that, Brandon?
Yeah, sure. So you're granting the argument as sound.
No, so therefore we
so which premise do you disagree with? Premise 1 or premise 2?
If you let me finish, then you'll hear. Therefore, you would say that we are never able to say there are any exclusionary definitions of any term ever, because hypothetically there could be a world where that has been imprinted in our mind by androids or something like that. That's your argument?
This message is sponsored in part by...
I apologize for the interruption, but Mr. sent in a big 50 on Cash App and said, horse lady video. So there you go, Mr. I hope you enjoy. Thank you for the Cash App. I appreciate you. My apologies, Brandon. I did cut off whatever you were going to respond with.
Yeah, no worries. I just don't understand why I'm being asked questions, right? I'm trying to figure out which premise you disagree with. It sounds like you granted the first premise, you disagree with the second premise, right? So if you disagree with the second premise, then some sort of contradiction is going to be entailed from the proposition gender isn't different than sex. I'm waiting for the proposition.
I'll play this game, right? I disagree with premise 1. Nothing's logically impossible because theoretically anything's possible.
Oh, okay. So it is the case that the sky is blue, and it's also not the case that the sky is blue. That's logically possible?
Correct, because we could have it imprinted in our Yes, that's the absurdity of the position you're making. You're telling me I just want to be clear.
Are you a dialetheist? Do you think true contradictions can exist? That's your view?
Welcome to criticizing your own position. Thank you very much.
It's not my position. You just said that there can be true contradictions, right?
That's correct.
Because understood in classical logic is that contradictions are impossible. So on your view, contradictions can be true.
Yes, that's
correct.
That right? That is correct.
Okay.
Based on
that's fine. No, that's fine.
Thank you. You can be quiet and listen to me explain, or you could continue to be glib. So I'll answer the position for you. When we got to the reductive nature of, you said technically anything's true because we could be brains in a vat that had anything put in. Well, if that's true, if that's your belief, then there's no reason that anything ever should be able to be impossible, because the very nature of reality and what we think is possible and impossible is based on the assumption of the objective things we could see. If all things are possible because we literally could be in a simulation, then that means that something could be contradictory and not contradictory at the same time. Now, your criticism,
my position, that
is your position.
This is just gift of the gab nonsense.
It's not. That's what you're doing, right? And so when
how is that what I'm doing?
Because you're literally saying when it comes to
I gave you an argument, and you had to say that there are true contradictions, right? That's your view. Anybody listening to this is going to think, oh, Rob thinks contradictions can be true. That's fucking insane. Nobody's going to think that you look like a normal person, a sane person in this conversation.
So again,
I've seen the red sky, so
please. Premise 2 is it's not logically impossible for gender to be different than sex. And when I get to it, and I'm like, but it is in this sense because I've defined what gender is. You basically default to, but words could literally mean anything. In fact, we could be in a simulation, so any word could mean anything. Therefore, it is not logically impossible because infinite possibilities exist, particularly when it comes to language. And so when
the
I
argument's
take it, please,
you're granting the argument sound when you say that. So it's a sound argument. You agree that gender is different than sex. You just conceded the whole debate proposition.
I did not.
You
I
just
said,
did. You just okay.
I can't believe, like, if you might learn something if you listen. So let me slow it down for you, and please don't interrupt. If it's true that we grant premise 2 that it's not logically impossible for gender to be different than sex, because all terms in language are infinite possibilities, and that we could literally be in a simulation where words could possibly mean whatever they want. If that's true, and that's why we say we grant premise 2, then it disproves premise 1. Because using that same rationale, when you say if gender isn't different than sex, then it's logically impossible for gender to be different than sex, your answer to why premise 2 should be granted is all things are possible, because we could be in a simulation.
That doesn't
if
follow.
all things are possible, then that means that it is
Nobody
possible.
said all things are possible. You're just
You
making that up. Nobody said that.
You literally said that the reason that we should grant premise 2 is because language could mean anything. We could be in a simulation,
say
etc.
that.
Then why could premise 2? Give me examples of when premise 2 could be true.
All premise 2 is saying is that there isn't a contradiction entailed from the proposition gender isn't different than sex. That's all premise 2 is saying.
That's not
you
true.
Granted it. You granted it's
That's
a sound
not
argument.
true. That's
the
not
argument
true.
goes
There
through.
is a contradiction because I define them as the
Give
same.
it.
So the way that I define the terms means that there is no light between them. That it is that it is logically impossible.
Okay, so let's write it down. What do you mean when you say the word sex?
Gender.
And what do you mean when you say gender?
Sex.
Period.
Very informative, Rob. Very good job.
You got
And
it.
which is which?
Sex
Yeah,
is,
so-
I'll explain it for the millionth time. I said, as long as we're not talking about there's a difference because one is the grammatical expression of the other, then yes, it would be an impossibility to say that there's a difference between the two. Because the word literally means sex, which is biological reality, male, female, and then gender, which is the grammatical expression of biological reality, male, female. So if you want to argue, well, the grammatical difference means that there's technically a difference, I said I would grant that. Other than that, no, they're the same. You haven't offered any reason why my interpretation is wrong. You're just said, hypothetically, is it true that there could be, it's not impossible that there could be a difference. That's true hypothetically because we could say language is socially constructed, we're in a simulation, etc. You're like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Therefore, I win. And I'm like, but if we take that to the logical extension, it disproves premise one because if anything's possible, because words could have malleable meanings, theoretically, they could. Like, for example, every word that you said
Still
there.
going. He's
right.
still going.
That's right. I am because I'm
He's
disproving your
still
point.
going.
Is it possible that if could mean something totally different than what you think it means? Is that possible?
It depends on who's using the word. Sure.
What do you mean it depends? Is it possible or not? Yes or no?
It's logically possible.
Okay. The next word you use is gender. Is it possible that gender means something different than what you used?
Yes.
Is it possible that the next word is something possibly different than what you use?
None of this entails a contradiction, sure. And
what
you
it proves-
agree with
what it
that.
proves-
You agree with that,
No.
by the way.
Again, and I'll finish.
You
with this.
already granted
what
it.
What it proves is that you
All
can't
this-
say anything.
All of this jibber jabber isn't helping you.
And
You already said you're
let
weak to a
me
contradiction.
spare you, Rob. Brandon, you got 5 minutes in the back, along with 5 vibes back there as well. Vibe time for your punishment, which is 5 minutes in the back. Think about what you did. There is a dunce hat in the back, and you can wear it high grid.
I'll finish this real point. If every word can mean something different, then you can't say that anything's an impossibility. Because every word within that statement he said theoretically could mean something different, which means nothing within language would be impossible then. Like his criticism of me is exactly my criticism of him. You're taking things to an absurd level saying hypothetically all things are possible, all language is possible, but it doesn't refute the central position that I'm making.
It's beautiful. Grid, do you want to add in to or ask anyone something? Anything?
I had a great conversation with a leftist on my channel tonight, and then I came over to this dumpster fire, and I'm going to bed. You guys are
Nobody gives a
insane.
shit about that stuff.
Good night, Grid.
I'm
Night,
kidding.
Grid.
I'm not going to bed just yet, but golly, what in the world is going on over here? I've never heard such rambling nonsense in my entire life, and I've listened to Democrats at length. My golly, gosh, wow.
Did you have a question to anyone, Grid? We're kind of round robbing it right now.
This is really
Question?
self-indulgent, Grid.
Yeah,
I am. That's my nature. I'll have to listen for a minute because I don't know
Okay.
what's been asked. I don't want to ask the same thing twice.
That's fine. Flo, did you want to add anything in? Ask anybody a question?
No, I'm coming in fairly cold, so I'll chill for a second too.
I
All
can
right.
I can light a sorry Sarah. I don't mean to interrupt your flow, but I can
Go ahead.
light a fire for
Go
us.
ahead.
Okay.
Have fun with the fire. I'll
Okay,
bring the
so
marshmallows.
this is sort of towards Rob, but anyone, because I know we got a couple new faces. So here's like what you might actually hear at a university from a philosophy professor. I'll try not to bore you. And so you meet like kind of sexy young he she they research assistant, and they ask you to take a survey, and you're surprised because you open a survey, and the only question is, what is your favorite drink? And so you get this survey back, and out of 100 responses, 96 of them say my favorite drink was Starbucks. Well, this is subjective self-reporting, right? Because I could say in a possible world, like I could talk to these people and say, well, don't you like tea? Don't you like energy drinks? Don't you like? What if you had just gotten a beer with like, a close friend or something like that, and you're trying to understand sort of the implications. This is where I land the plane, right?
Thank God.
If I'm talking about sorry, Dusty. If I'm talking about sex and gender, as a scientist, something I would say is that, well, I have to look at like sort of what the genes can actually say, but I have to treat these sort of subjective opinions that people share like they're bullshit, because they don't mean anything. You can say anything. You can picture a world where people say different things. And so at the end of the day, the only sort of concrete description that exists is what do your genes say? What sort of functionally can we say with confidence from science? And then that is talking about what genes do. That is talking about expression, period, end of story. And there is no, comparing it to other things, there's no controversies that could ever possibly come up because of this.
Yeah,
What is
sweet.
that?
Sweet. Gender is biological reality.
there, Sarah.
Thank you so much. We'll take it.
I
Even
have
though that was torching me.
What was that?
No,
What
because
was-
it's shaving off. Rob, if you came up and just said that, you would have been talking for 30 seconds.
Well, no,
like I just did.
but you understand Mel's argument is that's not what we should look at. We should say that self-identity is important. I agree with you, though. The whole debate was about why that's a bad idea. You make one succinct point there, but you understand the debate's a little different. Mel's making points, too, that we have to refute, and we have to give different examples as why it ought be the case what you're saying. But yes, your individual preference on something like I like pizza, right, and asking people, what's your favorite food? And so many people say pizza. That doesn't change the nature of what pizza is, right? So the descriptive of what does the term pizza means is different than the sort of preference of whether or not you like pizza.
Yeah, but Rob, this is what I'm saying is if you're
Well, basically,
self-reporting
he's
something
telling
about
you
pizza,
you're
can
just
self-report.
giving Duck. You're just giving like an elementary answer or response to the prompt in and of itself. What Rob's trying to explain to you is, yes, you're right, that works, but it's not the overall understanding of the prompt. We can't just give a like one sentence answer and I won the debate, because Mel is going to come back and refute with
He
other
gave an
points, and it's
analogy
just going to
that
go
didn't-
back.
That's confusing me now, because I thought I was saying that this whole platform, the floor totally, like, I know people hate floors, but yeah, there's
You
a
look
ceiling.
nice today,
The
Duck.
floor-
Your analogy was terrible, but you
That's
look
right.
nice.
Yeah, the analogy is sort of a non
Sure.
sequitur, but I was trying to bring it back in that preference is different. But yeah, the analogy doesn't really make sense, right? Because your preference on what you like to eat has nothing to do with should we say that gender is an expression of biological sex or not, right? Whether or not people like Starbucks is completely irrelevant to that question.
It does, though, because we also see then we see the Bible Belt Christians going around the United States, and boo boo boo. But all of a sudden, then there's all this science coming out of nowhere. I don't know where this came from. I don't know where it happened. And all of a sudden, it's not just trans mental health or what healthcare says, what the data says about these hot button issues. And so if I can be charitable and say, well, Rob, you get a political opinion, you also get to be informed by that scientific worldview. If you want it to be a worldview, like I'll even say that's fine. Let me tell you and show you what researchers actually talk about, what biologists actually think, instead of quoting these Joe Rogan conspiracy theorists about what gender and sex is.
Enjoy
I mean, I
your
guess.
time in the back, Duck.
Thanks,
Thank
Duck. It's nice
you.
hearing from you. I have 5 more minutes, and then I got to
Okay,
run. I'm
I
not
want
trying
to
to be a
hear. I
jerk.
want to let. No, you have gone over and beyond what you initially promised. Zers, did you have something to add? You've been quite quiet.
Yes. Yes. I actually had a question for both parties. It looks like Mel's been quiet for a while, so I don't know if my question to Mel was any good. By the way, I am going to clip that little spurg there, just to let you know. Now, I come from a generation where, you know, we would hear something like, it's a girl would tell another girl, "Hey, why don't you go date Joe or something?" And she'd go, "Oh no, he's a little sissy boy." Or you would also hear a group of men sitting around talking about how he was a girly man or something when a man was unable to work as much as them. And this primarily was in the heterosexual straight culture, not necessarily in the gay culture or the transgender. At the time, there was no such thing as a transgender culture. And what there were gay people and there were drag queens. And what I was wondering, you know, is what we're basically looking at is there has always been, and in other cultures, there's nations where there's a third sex that they actually worship, that third sex. I can't remember the exact nation, but there is a nation that they actually worship a third sex. That's Google. You can search it up.
Sex or
Now,
third sex or third gender?
A third gender.
Just
Sorry,
wanted
not
to
a
be clear.
third
That's
sex.
no problem. Yep.
Yeah, not a third sex, a third gender, because other than abnormalities where you get XXY, XY, what combinations of confusion, you know, you basically have for the most part two genders. So when we're talking about somebody who's going to be transgender, you know, we have somebody like this house right here. This house would be like, let's say this would be a what is it? A English farm home, I believe it is, New England farm home. And this house is absolutely a New England farm home. There's nothing you can do to this house ever to change it from being a New England farm home. Well, you know, it is, and it will always be. So that we can look at as sex. And then we have, like, let's say a modern home, a more modern contemporary home. And that home you can never make really into a New England farm home, not without knocking the whole roof off and starting different structures and stuff like that. Unfortunately, inside of this house, now what we're talking about when we're saying gender, when we're saying gender is what the person thinks they are. Do they really think that they are, you know, they can be the house, but in that house is this contemporary home. So if you're sitting inside of this home, I know you as an outside viewer and me as an outside viewer see that person as a clown. They got a contemporary home inside of a modern farm home or inside of an English farm home. So but the person inside feels like their home is contemporary, but it is still sexually the farm home and vice versa. You can have the modern home be totally a farmhouse inside. And this is what I think that Melanie is arguing, is that each individual person inside feels something different. And you made this argument while you were speaking by saying that is the sky green? To some individuals, yes. To some individuals, yes, the sky is green. Does that mean the sky is green? No, the sky is blue. The sky is blue. That's its sex. But to that individual, there's nothing you can do to ever change them from seeing the sky is green, because that's the way their brain interprets blue.
Okay,
So
they're
you're saying
wrong.
they have
They're
a subject-
objectively. So we'll answer this real quick. One, that proves that they're objectively wrong. By the same way you said there's no way that this New England farmhouse could ever be anything but a New England farmhouse. Please let me finish.
Yeah.
And so if I said, no, actually, that's not a New England farmhouse, that's a modern house, you by definition of saying it could never be anything but a New England farmhouse prove that you're saying that I would be wrong. I'm objectively wrong because your definition was it could never be anything else. So I am mistaken. I am looking at it wrong. And the other thing that you did was you literally literally, like, this occurs all through this debate with Mel and with other people that have come in here. You start under the assumption of, I'm correct about what the definition of gender is. Now, let me give you descriptors of what that definition is. Therefore,
Well,
it
wait a
proves, please, let me finish. Therefore, it
Okay.
proves that my
Can you
definition
do it
is
kind of quick
correct.
because I speak
I'm
very fast?
fundamentally arguing that,
The
no,
focus you
you
do.
are wrong.
No, you
That's
don't.
not what the definition of gender is.
I speak
And I give
slow, but it
example,
doesn't
and
take
that-
me long to say what I need to
Oh
say.
my God.
Yes, it does.
Okay,
Jesus.
let me just say something
Sorry, sir.
real quick because y'all are fucking just pulling me in all sorts of directions this evening. And I didn't get a long enough nap to deal with this shit on a fucking Friday night when I could be doing 10 million other things or even so much as sleeping. Stop fucking interrupting. It's not that fucking hard to shut your goddamn mouth. Really not that fucking hard. So let Rob finish. He just said he only had 5 minutes. Shut the fuck up, Rob.
apologize.
Please
Thank you.
continue.
And I just want to say, as a meta point, like, I know I'm quite verbose and I lack brevity. That's absolutely true. But the people that are criticizing me, like Zare there and Mel, you guys go on big long tangents too, and I sit there and let you do it. So it becomes awkward, like when you're criticized, you're too long-winded. Like, dude, you just went off on a long story that said, look, the inside of the house could look different than the outside of the house. Therefore, gender. No, you haven't argued why it is that gender is about self-identity. I provided examples all through the debate that showed that's not the way most people use it. That's not the way that most studies used it. It's only people that are when we say, for example, should there be segregation between men and women prisons, everybody goes yes, because they're assuming that it means biological reality. When we talk about men making more than women, everybody knows that those studies are talking about biological reality. That is the way it is. That is the way it used to be before John Money and others changed this that were radical queer theorists in the 1950s. And that's the way it ought to be, because the alternative, if we just say that anything could mean anything, that man just means whatever you think man means and it's subjective, is disastrous because it renders the term meaningless, because each of us would have no idea what you mean by men, because it could mean a million different things to a million different people. That's it.
Okay. So when you said man up, what did you mean when you said man up? Do I need to get extra chromosomes, or do I need to grow a longer yang, or do I need to get more? I mean, what do you mean? I stepped on a nail. I'm screaming like a little girl, and you said man up. How do I man up? Do I become more man somehow, or do I act in a social manner that is
Flo,
constructed in the way that you?
Can you answer loud and clear what you said? I heard it.
Stop being a bitch.
Thank
Right.
you. That's what we mean by that.
Right.
What does it have to do with biological sex?
It has to do
It
with
didn't change my sex, but I do understand what you meant.
I already went through this exact sample with Corinth, who's very well spoken, and I enjoyed that conversation. I recommend you go back there. To summarize it as quickly as possible, man up means to act like a man. Saying to act like a man itself, by definition, is saying act like the characteristics of the thing we're talking about. That does not prove that man doesn't mean biological reality. And to further argue Corinth's point, what I would be happy to talk to him in the future about this is, if we say, but that proves that man could have two possible definitions, then the same would be true of any noun. Literally any noun in the English language, because we could say it means the thing it is. A tree means what we know biologically a tree is, but it could also mean to act like a tree. And so we would say literally every noun has the definition of what it is and to act like it, which again renders it redundant. And I'm still correct.
It doesn't render redundant. It's the entire basis of the majority of poetry in the history of the English language. This is all of poetry. This is all of metaphors.
Name
But
one
it in
noun.
fact can. Check this out. I have a video that I'm going to be putting. Well, you were talking to me a second. I waited. I have a video that I'm going to be putting out on my channel a few days ago. It wasn't planned around this show at all. I had decided to play it because I thought it was funny, mainly because there was a novelty toy found at the police scene. What we had was a female. What we had was a female that was
like, you're running all over the place. I'm just done with. I'm done
okay.
with this panel. Rob and Mel. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna let Rob and Mel give like a final statement. I'm gonna let Flo, Grid, and Reese. You seem cool. Everybody else, I'm just booting for the night. I'm done. I'm so fucking done.
I support this decision, actually.
Thank you. I
I'm actually all right
apologize.
with it too.
Jason, you are cool. I apologize, but I'm fucking done. So here's what I'm going to do. Rob, I know you have to go. If you want to go ahead and give like a final thought, tell everybody fuck off, whatever you want to do, go for it.
Yeah. First off, I have to say, despite the constant interruptions with Mel, I actually thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I think that it gets a little exacerbating when you hear, like, particularly people that come in, like, I think there's no doubt that Mel's conversation with me, again, despite the interruptions, at least we had sort of a flow that was going. People come in with these like big stories that you don't know where they're going, and it's like it's a little more difficult. But I thoroughly enjoyed my appearance here, and I'm not going to talk about the specific issue here. I just want to say, Sarah, I thought you were a reasonable moderator. Mel, despite the differences in the interruption and stuff, I enjoyed a conversation, would have a conversation with you again. I enjoyed the sort of panel discussion afterwards. I think that it's sort of reductive the way we talk about this. Semantics isn't necessarily my favorite thing, but it was fun. And I enjoy the content of being able to discuss things with different people. Would be happy to come on again, and really appreciate. Maybe I need to become less of a pisshead to less glib or whatever. But it's fun, and I hope everyone enjoyed it. I hope Sarah made a shitload of money and sort of subscribers and everything, and I hope Mel did too. I think that would be fantastic. So,
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate that. Mel, your final thoughts?
Oh, I was waiting for somebody to actually say something directly against me, if you don't mind.
I'm gonna head out then, Mel. Take it easy, Mel and Sarah. We'll see you.
See you, Rob.